Greetings, everyone. My name is Jennifer Lee. I'm here with my neighbor, Kate Albrecht, and we are delighted to bring you some really talented speakers today. We've called our series Indigenous Voices. We feel that everybody in our area can really benefit from hearing from Native people today. This culture is here, it's alive, the people are here, they're just often unrepresented and unheard. So,
hi, welcome. We're very happy to have you spend time with us and to be able to listen to our presenters today. And in appreciation and acknowledgement of the Indigenous people on whose lands and waterways this Zoom is coming from. This is the traditional homelands of the Mohican, the Nipmuc, and the Sokoke Abenaki to the north, and the waterways that flow from these lands flow down into the Quinatucket and the say it please.
Mahicanatuck.
Mahicanatuck, which many of us know as the Housatonic.
Hudson.
We keep learning. We are grateful to the local cultural councils of the town of Cummington, of Charlemont and Holly and Plainfield for their generous support of this event, and to the Nolumbeka project, and also to the technical skills of Lise McLaughlin and Nature Culture. I believe, we are actually tremendously thankful for much, much more than we can go on and list, and give honor to all the elders and ancestors of all of us and of this land, and to our descendants, that we may leave them a beautiful world through our actions and our learnings in these days. And I'll now introduce Deb Spears Moorehead, who I've been looking forward to hearing her presentation for many months because COVID has interrupted our gettings together. Deborah is an artist using many media and both paintings and things like that, but also dance and music, maybe not dance. I will stop talking and I will let Deborah speak for herself.
Yeah, fine.
Thank you, Deb.
Hi, everyone. It's so exciting to be here today. Kwe, my name is Deb Spears Moorehead. Watasawi's Katu Sipu. My native name is Talking Water. In my language, it's Katu Sipu. I want to thank people for having me here. It's an honor to be here. It's very exciting. I wish I could be there in person, and I'm looking forward to when I can. Thank you, first of all, to Jennifer Lee for initially inviting me, and Kate Albrecht. And I want to thank Lisa McLaughlin for her technical support. She's been so much help to get this up and going. And so thank you for anyone that is involved in the Indigenous Voices in the Berkshires and the Nolumbeka project and Mass Cultural, I don't know what the next word is, Council. Okay, thank you to everyone. So I guess I'll begin my talk from here. So my name is, I said, Deb Spears Moorehead. So I am Wampanoag through my maternal ancestry, and I'm also Mohawk and Narragansett through my mother's ancestry, and Pequot. And my father was also Narragansett and Pequot. And my mother also had some Mohawk and Nipmuc. There's a lot of Nipmuc because I come from Massasoit, and Massasoit's wife was the daughter of the Nipmuc's sachem. So I come from a long line of Eastern Woodland people. So, but I want you to close your eyes and imagine the suburbs. And here I am in a family of six, and I'm on a street where there's lots of neighbors, and I'm about 6 years old, and there isn't anybody that looks like me, besides my brothers and sisters and my parents. So it's a it's something that a lot of us Eastern, Northeastern Native American people have in common, is that when we went to school, we were told that our nations didn't exist. I was told that, Eastern Woodland people were pretty much uh, gone. We didn't exist anymore. We were gone back in the 1700s. So, which didn't make any sense to me because every day my mother would tell me as she braided my hair that I was an Elderkin and I was Annawon's people. And, I was Native. She didn't say Native American, they said Indian then. So, it didn't make sense to me. So I would come home and I would ask questions. And then my mother told me we were Sioux. So she would tell me these stories, and the stories I found were just so far away from where I was at. Where I was at is in Warwick, Rhode Island, and I thought that I was misplaced because the Native community was there was so they weren't here, they weren't there. There were maybe two families that were Native American in Warwick, Rhode Island. So as my life unfolded, I found that I was not misplaced. The rest of the surrounding of the people were the ones that were misplaced. I was right where I was supposed to be because I lived, my house was on a place called Lincoln Park. And throughout my research through my life, I found out that Lincoln Park was the Lincoln family farm. And the Lincoln family farm was my grandmother's family. That's homeland. That's where they lived. And I have lots of affidavits from people from them that time, way back in that day, that told me that they had clam bakes there with natives from all the eastern tribes that lasted for 3 or 4 days. So my research started when I was about 6 years old from asking all those questions. And what I found out was that they didn't want to answer any of my questions because I was not emotionally equipped to handle them. I was too young. So this is how my career as an artist came about because my grandmother and my mother would constantly tell me that I needed to draw what I was thinking, not to, be writing about it. I mean, not to be asking about it. I needed to draw pictures. So that's where my coordination from my eye to my hand started. I At that point I was pretty good at drawing and I just got better and better. So I knew at a young age that I was an artist. So I've never really done anything more. Well, I do a lot more, but that doing art is my focus. So I wanted to start, which I jumped off too quickly. I wanted to do a land acknowledgement before I got into my talk, but I jumped right in, like chomping at the bit. So let me say a land acknowledgement. Ever since time immemorial, as far back as we know, my ancestors, the Wampanoags, Narragansetts, Nipmucks, uh, Mohegan, Pequot, they all lived on this land that we call Turtle Island. We've been here for 10,000 or more. We have our original instructions from the Creator, It's been 400 years since European contact, and the Europeans have renamed a lot of our homelands to suit the English language and the needs of the newcomers. Um, New England was not the name of this region; it was Turtle Island. Um, we have a history that expands back to the beginning of creation. I've been told by historians that we didn't have a history, so they had to write one for us. And that is not true. We have our oral tradition goes back to creation. And from the relationship that we have from creation, we live in a traditional way of life. The Mother Earth gives us what we need to sustain ourselves, and we, in return, protect her as stewards to this land. So that's where, when just recently, a couple of weeks ago, a man said that we didn't, told me that I didn't have a written history. And this is where, I do have an oral traditional history that goes back to creation. And here's my book, Finding Balance, that I'm going to be talking about throughout this talk. It's called, I don't know if you're seeing it backwards, but where I'm seeing it, it looks backwards. So it's the genealogy of Massasoit's people, oral and written history of the Seekonk Pokanoket Wampanoag tribal nation. And it's available through me and through Amazon. So just let me know if um, you can get my contact if you want to get one. So back to being on the Lincoln family farm where I started talking. So my mother told me that we were from Sioux, and that really, like, how could we be from? I just thought, how could I be a Sioux? Like when I learned from high school, elementary, middle school, they said the Sioux lived out in South Dakota. So it was, I was like, it was really hard for me to form an identity because the people that were supposed to be teaching me and educating me were telling me I didn't exist, and my parents were telling me that I was from some place so far away that I couldn't figure out how I would end up where I was at. Well, throughout my life, I uncovered the history of the land through my research and asking questions to all the elders. Uh, so it's it's our job as the elders now. We're the going to be the ancestors to the next 7 generations. So I didn't want my children or my great great grandchildren or anyone that comes after me to have to go through what I went through. So I don't think I did it then for their purpose, but I think I did it. I did the research because my curiosity was so was it just was I was obsessed with knowing what happened to the people on this land. I didn't realize it was 400 years when I was young. So I asked questions, and uh, when I was about 29, in my 20s, my uncle died, and he had the house that my grandparents lived in Seekonk, Massachusetts. And when he died, he gave everything to the church. This church that my mother's family built. That church right there. My grandfather died putting this roof on. He was a carpenter, so he died of pneumonia. They didn't have antibiotics then, so. But little did we know that he was collecting all the information that we needed to show our ancestry. But nobody knew it because my mother was 5 when he died. And so nobody knew my grandfather's ancestry. My mother just knew her ancestry came through uh, Annawon and his great granddaughter. I don't know how many times removed, but her name was Mary Clegburn, and she was the great granddaughter of Annawon. So that's why my mother always said Annawon's people. So back to when my mother was 5 years old, all the missionaries were coming to Seekonk, Massachusetts, and telling her family and her tribe that they were heathens and that they had to get Christianized, and and they didn't have any value unless they were Christianized, because that's how that's how the colonial techniques that were put on the indigenous people of these of all all Turtle Island. That's how one of the techniques that they would use to disenfranchise us from our identity and our value and our worth. They would say that we didn't have any value unless we were Christianized. We weren't even seen as humans. So my great grandmother, I'm going to show you a picture of her. Her name was Amelia. She and her children in the tribe started going to the missionaries meetings, and they I have a lot of their testimonies from them turning into Christian Indians. I guess they were like drinking a lot or something like that before they were Christian. So uh so when my grandfather died, I mean when my uncle died, I was about in my 20s. So I asked the church if they would give me any pictures that they found, because my uncle Willie had given my grandmother and grandfather's whole estate to the church. So after a year, the ministers from the church called me and they said they had a box and would I like it? So I said yes. So the box was my grandfather was a carpenter, so it was his a box that my grandfather made as a carpenter, and inside the box was all the genealogy that led to Massasoit, because his side of my ancestry went to Massasoit. So as I did my research, I found that um, all Massasoit's people tried to keep that bloodline strong. So like all the Eastern Woodland people, they went up and down the coast, socials in the winter, powwows in the summer. So that's where they would meet each other. So that's why I have so many cousins that are from this Eastern Woodland area, because that's the history of us. So most of most of my ancestors are the leaderships people of the Eastern Woodland people. That's so. I'm going to show you a picture of my grandmother, who here first. Here's a picture of. I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to show you a picture of my grandmother and my mother, who were the ones that told me to. I got to push play somewhere. I don't know where my play screen went. I can't find the play screen. Oh, there it is up there. Nope, yep, there it is. This is my mother and my grandmother, my father, on my father's side. So my mother's the one that says is standing on with that flower in her hair, and my grandmother was Beatrice Spears, and she was Pequot and Spanish. So these two women are the women that taught me to draw, to never stop drawing. So I have to escape this. Okay. And then I wanted to show you pictures of my grandmother on my mother's side, who were the Seekonk Wampanoags who became Christianized. So here we go. This all this technical stuff of okay, play. Let's see if that'll do it. Can you see that? Okay, good. All right. So the lady in the center is my grandmother, Amelia Jane Eldekin, and the lady to the both ladies on each side of her are my her daughters. And the one I don't know if where you're seeing left or right, but the side that says Annie on the Annie and Ada and Smith and Aura Smith, that's the side that I'll be talking about. That side is the Aura Smith is my grandmother, the one closest to the lady in the center, and that's my aunt next to her. My mother is standing with her hand in her mouth. That's my Uncle Dan and my Uncle Willie standing under there. And the rest are all her kids and their wives and husbands. So that's them. I'm going to escape that. Okay, so you're not seeing my screen right now? I'm not sure. Seeing me? Okay. I lost everything that makes the screen big. So I'll just keep talking. I don't know how to make the screen big. I'm not going to do anything just in case. Wait a minute. You are screen sharing. Stop share. That's how I do it. Okay, here I am again. So, uh, so I went around for years and years asking everybody at every powwow, every social, if they knew because the box came with a whole lot of pictures. So I asked everybody, do you know who this person is? And they had names on them. So I spent years and years asking questions, and my family were like, "Why is she asking so many questions?" And then, a lot of spiritual things happened to me, and how I found the information. So there was this one grandmother, Emma Jane Lincoln, and she was on the land, the Lincoln family farm. And what I found of her, I met all her grandchildren. She had three husbands. She married three times, so she had three sets of grandchildren, and every one of them grandchildren had the same story, that Emma Jane Lincoln came home to her two brothers dead. They were tortured to death for this land at the state. That's where the airport is today, the Green Airport. And so that's so come to find out, where I was living on Lincoln Park, the reason why it was called Lincoln Park, because it was part of the Lincoln family farm, which was the whole city of Warwick, which was before called Shawmut. So I was not misplaced. I was right where I was supposed to be. I was my grandmother's great granddaughter, living right on the land. So my roots came right out of the land. So that was one land base that I found out the background and the rich history of the land. And I just kept going on and going to each one of my ancestors that was in that um, carpenter's box, my grandfather's box. So after I'd say about 7 or 8 years, Julie Jennings looked into the box, and she was studying anthropology then. I think she's got a degree in anthropology. And she said, "Debbie, this genealogy right here goes right to Zariah Gould Mitchell." And she said, "Zariah Gould Mitchell is Massasoit's descendant." So sure enough, that's where my ancestor John Walmsley, who was a whaler, that's how he survived after the genocide. Um, where his genealogy ended in that book was where Zariah Gould Mitchell's genealogy began. So I'm going to show you pictures of my grandparents, Zariah Gould Mitchell, the genealogy. So I'm going to share my page again, which share screen. And I'm going to share. And I'm going right over to here, and I'll be right with you. Just find the right pictures. And then I'll play it. So right here's a picture of my Uncle Dan that I showed you. That's my Uncle Dan that was in that picture with my mother, and that's my mother. I mean, my mother's tribe over there building the church. Let's see. The Wamsey. Here's the Wams. Oh, here's Zariah Gould Mitchell. Now, how do I play it? Okay, here's Zariah Gould Mitchell. That's her and her two daughters. And this is a lady. Her name's Young, and they're part of the Walmsley clan. And here's my mother. No, here's my, whoa, this thing has to get out of the way. Yeah, there's that picture that I'm showing right now. I have to play. That is the lady on the left, Melinda Mitchell, is Zarigu Mitchell's daughter. And that the lady next to her is my grandmother, Aura Elderkin. And you can certainly see the resemblance. The man on the far right is my great grandfather, who that's his chest, wooden chest. It's either him or his father. I'm pretty sure it's his father. But they were all Wampanoag too. Okay, stop. Escape. I love the escape. Thank you for telling me about the escape. Here, this is the Walmsley crew that I come from. Play. That's these are the Walmsleys. They ended up turning into Onsleys. Uh, the powers that were then convicted the two Walmsley brothers of some horrible crimes that they didn't commit. So they had to change their name to Onsley. And this is a picture of my grandmother. That's her two brothers, and those are the Walmsleys. This Chief Sunset. So they were all mixed with the Narragansett and Wampanoag because they all intermarried. They're all the same people. Here's some pictures of my art. Oh, I'm going back to here's the genealogy. So on the top you have Osamequin, and so Massasoit's married to Annawon's sister. Annawon's married to Massasoit's sister. So that's why they're brother-in-laws and sister-in-laws. And then I come from Amy. So Amy marries Tuspaquin, and then they have a kid named Benjamin Tuspaquin. And Benjamin Tuspaquin's up on that piece of paper where Amy is, and Benjamin Tuspaquin marries Mercy Felix, and then they have Lydia, and then no, Lydia has a son named Paul. Yeah, there he is. And Paul has a son named John Walmsley, and John marries Mary, and they have Selena, and they marry Harrison She marries Harrison Gray Otis Lincoln, and each one of these people has a story. Because I researched every single person's life, and each person has a story. In their stories, I could do a talk on just one person's story, like Harrison Gray Otis Lincoln. He was um, he was the mayor. Not Harrison. Yeah, Harrison. Yeah, Harrison Gray Otis was the mayor of Boston, and he had one of my great grandmothers, like back there, as a indentured servant. And there was the Otis family were the overseers, and this lady, what's her, Barbara Roberts Green, she was a Mohawk, and so she had her son Harrison Gray Otis Lincoln out of wedlock from the mayor because I was, and so his last name is Lincoln because he took on her maiden name. So Harrison Gray Otis's Lincoln's parents her name was Barbara Lincoln, and her parents were Nipmuc and Mohawk. Back to Harrison. So Harrison has Emma Jane Lincoln. Emma Jane is the one that found her brothers on the land in Warwick. They had their fingernails pulled out, and they were all burnt, and they were killed. And then the state took over the land, and they put X's on the deed that made it sound like the brothers signed the deeds. But then the state made it look like the brothers killed each other over the land when it was their land. So then Rhoda Smith married my father Ed, and there's me. So that's how the genealogy goes. Sometimes like people like to see it because seeing it is a lot easier than saying it. So I spent my whole life finding out the stories of these people because what I found out is that for Eastern people, the colonial techniques were to confuse us, make our whole background obscured so that we had no idea who we were. Wait a minute, did I escape? We had no idea who we were, and we wouldn't, they said so many things that were derogatory to being a Native American. So they made it so that we wouldn't know who we were. So, and a lot of Native people don't know their ancestry because at a certain point, it was so much easier to say to not say you were Native because it was just something that would cause you harm. So after King Philip's War, um, over Massachusetts was part of Maine, and so after King Philip's War, they had a treaty of all the Native people in that whole area, and it was Treaty of Casco Bay, and part of that treaty was that um, everybody, all the Native people would be get along, with the Europeans. But in that treaty, the my tribe, the Pokanokets, were excluded, and they put a bounty on the head of anybody that's name was Pokanoket. So that's when they stopped calling themselves Pokanoket and they started calling themselves Annawon's people. So in Wampanoag. So um, there was lots of tribes, and we just kind of bowed out gracefully and stayed within, the area of Seacock. So in my book, I find all these land bases. I ended up finding 7 land bases that all my ancestors came out of, were born on that piece of property in the land. And so I found that all the places that my ancestors grew out of have become land trust. And it's obvious because they know that that land was stolen from us, taken in all deceitful ways. And so they don't really want to have anybody to have it private property because at one point, if we ever come back and say, there's a deed that says this is our land, so they just make it a land trust so that we can't come back and say, well, maybe we can. Well, anyways, my book is based on 7 pieces of land where my ancestors come out of it. So, and that's what was really hard to do because I had so much information. I had a whole room full of research. And there was one point that I had so much research in the room that my oldest brother came over with a shovel and a wheelbarrow and he started shoveling things out. And I was going hysterical. I was saying, please don't throw that out. And he said, Debbie, you're never going to even find it. And by the time you find it, it's going to be no good. So that's when I realized I have to get organized. And luckily, many people told me that what I was doing as a cultural bearer, traditional keeper, that I was living the life of degree. There's a degree called Masters in Cultural Sustainability. So my friend said, Deb, you should apply for that degree. And I did, and they accepted me. And so luckily, the first thing I did was tell them I want to write this book about my ancestors. And so right away, I was, my professors taught me how to organize my research. So I organized all my research in time. I started from uh, before King Philip's War, beginning of creation, right up into present day. And then for my book, I put I put the 7 land bases, and then I had the people, my ancestors, grow right out of that land base. So that's how. Otherwise, I had no way of understanding how I was going to organize all this information of, all these ancestors for 13 generations back in each story. So that's what I did. So that's how my book came about. Now I want to tell you how my art came about. So I'm going to show you a picture of my book. So I'm going to, let's see. You are screen scanners. So, all right. So there's my book, and it's
E-
available at Amazon.
Excuse me, Deb, can I break in for a moment? This is Kate.
Hi,
Okay,
Kate.
I just want to let people know how they can ask you a question, because I forgot to do that.
Hmm.
So everyone who's in Zoom, what you do is hit the bottom of your screen and there's a little Q&A bubble. And you type your question in there. And that way Deb will be able to see it and then she'll be able to address it. And I think we're getting near the question and answer time, but go ahead and type your questions in. Thank you, Deb.
So you're welcome. So the reason my book is called Finding Balance is because I found that the erasure in the obscurity of our history uh, made it so that the history that you learn about us, the one that I spoke about right from the beginning, where they said we were erased um, and we didn't exist, it's a biased, totally biased uh, history. And anytime that you're writing a history, you have to have whoever was involved in that history as part of the history. And we were excluded. So my book is called Finding Balance because it's to find the balance of the history. When you hear both sides of the story, you come up with the truth. So uh, that's that story. So then, when I was growing up, I was telling you about how my grandmother and my grandparents made me draw all the time. So I went to art school because I knew that's what I was supposed to do, and I went to Swain School of Design in New Bedford, and I really loved being there because I was with all the people that were on the same frequency as I was as an artist. So um, the only thing is, I yearned for a indigenous teacher, somebody that knew, our cultural way of life, and they didn't have one. So at one point, they were teaching me everything about European um, art and European history and heritage, and I just said no. So at one point, I think in 1981, I painted my last picture that was of European descent people, and I started painting Eastern Woodland people as another way of saying, this is Pensive Woman, the last one in 1981, as another way of saying, okay, enough's enough. I want to paint my people. I want to paint who I am, uh, who I feel are my people. So I'm just going to show you some quick pictures of my art. This is Norman Machado. That original just sold the other day, and this somebody asked me to do a lone wolf. I'm a clan mother of the Seekonk Wampanoag, and we are wolf clan. So I paint a lot of wolves, and I realized that we spent our highway was the waterways. So I'm painting what what was the history of the Eastern Woodland people. Then I started doing murals, and my murals are all teaching murals. They teach one teaches one teaches the effects of colonization and how to push back and live the opposite of colonization, so
Mm.
that which are healthy lifestyles. And this one is a land acknowledgement mural that's in Providence. That was last year. This one is going to the Providence City Hall.
Mm.
Talked about it earlier. This one tells the usage of the water in Providence River and how rich the land was and who lived there. And this one was to push back the people that wanted to build on Providence River and keep the access um, from the public of the water. So that one is also a teacher mural. This is the sculpture. This is a sculpture that I just finished with the lady on the left, Allison Newsom. It's catches the water and it keeps the water inside, so it's a functional sculpture, and the water is used to plant gardens. So she asked me to tell her the stories of three sisters, and I did the drawings for the chain catches on the top, and we've been just having a great time getting to know each other because she lives on Massasoit Spring. Her studio is right on top of Massasoit Spring site. So when I go there, I just feel like incredible. And she's gifted me things that go back before King Philip's War that she's that's from her the area that she lives in. So this one, do you see this one? This is the one. This picture just is Leah Hopkins, and she won. I mean, I this one won an award, um, National Congress of American Indian, and it was from a photograph that a native man took, and I can't take all the credit because it was his beautiful photograph. His name was Casey. I can't think of his last name, but I should remember that. So I'm ready for the Q&As. If there's anything else that I can answer for you, I just want to show. I didn't tell you the story of how my people ended up in Seekonk. If I have time, I can tell you that. I don't know how much time I have. How much time do I have left before the Q&As? Nobody knows. Okay, so this is some of our tribe today. Did I share it? I don't know. This is one of the sachems over there. Billy Guy. He's in Bristol. We have Darrell Waldron as our chief in Seekonk. This is a picture of my daughter when she was Miss Seekonk in a parade. There's chief. So I'm ready for questions if you are. Oh, reciprocity. I wanted to speak about reciprocity. So I don't, okay. Am I still sharing? I don't think so.
I'll end this
So-
for you.
What's that? Thank you.
And if you're ready for the Q&A.
Yes, I didn't talk about reciprocity, but maybe that'll be part of the answers. I just want to say that the difference between our culture and European culture in the capitalistic way of society is that we believe that everything that you take from the earth, you need to replenish. Our way of life is reciprocity. We're the same way with people. We have relationships. It's a give and take. So the balance is off when one entity, one person, one whatever corporation takes and takes and takes and takes. That throws the balance off, and that makes Mother Earth angry. And when Mother Earth is angry, then human life is expendable. She gets, when she's crying, she makes all those hurricanes. When she's angry, it's all those fires and that's burning down, and the balance has to be restored, and then for Mother Earth to come back and be, she's going to take care of us. And also another thing that I want to say is what we're doing to the sky and the air. There's just, with all the cell phones, be careful with the cell phones. They haven't researched them enough, and they're finding that people are getting brain tumors, they're getting cancers everywhere because there's so much electromagnetic rays in the air and radiation, and so they're not looking out for the next 7 generations. We are the ancestors to the next 7 generation. The people that are doing these corporation and running all the, that are changing the world so much, like to the 5G, 4th G, 3rd G. These people that are changing it, they need to put in to their research how they can be reciprocal, how they can learn the effects of things before they put them on the human life, and they put them out to us. So that's all I have to say. All right. Question and answers. So I should go to the question and answers. Here I go. Okay.
Can you see how to find them, Deb?
Yes, I'm reading them.
Okay, okay.
Is there a website where we can get the location of the murals? That's a good question. Oh, do you want me to type the answer or talk the answer? Talk it. A website where we can get the locations of the mural. I am putting together a website which will put the locations of the murals on, and it also has Native American tourism. I have Turtle Island Native American Tourism Company that I'm just putting up, and it's for the Sowams Heritage Area, where if anyone would like to see the sites in the Native American Sowams area, they can have a Native American perspective. And I will put my murals on as part of the Native American tours, so that if you would like me to meet you at one of the murals or one of the sites, and I can give you you know, a presentation there. So thank you for asking that, because the site is being built now, and I'm going to make sure that that's put on there. And if right now, if you can't get that, just go to Deb Spears Moorehead and send me a Facebook friendship, and just ask me, and I'll give you the answers. Okay, always welcome to talk to people straight firsthand. For recognizing the water, yes, you're welcome for recognizing the waterways as well as land. Most of our land bases are called something to do with waterways because they were our highways. That's how we got to someplace really quick, and the land would be named after what part of how it related to the Great Salt Pond or the fresh water. So yes, can't wait to read your book for sharing. I think you're saying thank you for sharing your process and learning. You're welcome, Donata. Um, Mohawk versus Ganawaga. I'm not sure how to say that. Ganawaga. Is there a culturally appropriate choice? Or, well, yeah. Well, yes. If you are, I think that Mohawk was a word that meant flesh eater. So I would go with the other word. Um, yeah, the Mohawks were the people at the Eastern Door, and I think the word Mohawk is more derogatory than the actual word that calls the name of the people. Most tribes are named the people of this certain area. I think I answered all the questions.
Okay, Deb, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Looking forward to
Will this recording be posted anywhere after? Yes.
yes,
Where?
Lise, you got to answer it.
Lisa.
Lise, we need you to answer.
Lisa, oh, she's
Yeah.
Lisa. Can you type in?
Yes, the recording will be posted on Nolumbeka Project's YouTube page. So you will be able to see it from their website and also watch it on YouTube.
These are the questions.
Okay, so just put that Nolumbeka project into YouTube and it'll come up, right?
Right.
Okay. All right. Maybe you could type the wordings in at the Q&A so that people can see that.
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you for this fun experience. I enjoyed every bit of it, and I've been honored to be a part of this whole Indigenous Voice of Berkshires series. Katapatash, Pishkanash.
Thank you, Deb. That was really amazing. That's the real history of this land.
We want to get to that later.
There is a question here. What about the idea of having a way of giving land to Native Americans after one is deceased? Yeah, now we're talking. The Crandall family, they did just that. The Crandall family had been gifted the land from the Narragansetts to use for about 300 years. And when they were done with it, they gifted it back to the Narragansett Nation. So that's a great idea. And people in the area, like the Okatow Project, they are finding a way to give back to Native American people. And I think that's a great idea. Very good. Deb, thank you so much.
Okay,
I'm just,
I'm going to put the on the type. I'm going to type in my website that's has all these answers.
excellent.
Question and answers. I don't know how. It doesn't let me type in. Type answer. Okay. Here's my website. Well, it's wampanoagartist.com. wampanoagartist.com. That's my website that will give you all these answers. And my Facebook is Deborah Spears Moorehead. Okay, done. And just
All
for
right. So, wow. Now I'd like to introduce Annawon Weeden, a champion dancer, well known at all the powwows. Kind of funny guy. He's fun. The greatest thing about knowing Annawon has been through the years to watch him with his parents and his kids. It's just amazing. It shouldn't be amazing, but this is how this culture has survived. His parents taught him and he teaches his kids, and on it goes. Annawon is really great with kids, whether they're native or non-native. He can really reach them. So I encourage people in the schools around here to try to get a hold of this guy and get him to one of your school programs. He's a great educator. He's been working at Mashantucket Pequot Tribal Nation Cultural Resources Department. He's a consultant. He's also an actor. So I just want to welcome Annawon Weeden.
Kataptash, Kataptanamo, Kwe Debbie, Square Kwasani Tompak, Natasuis Annawon Weeden, Nutamas, Masipi Wampana, Ka Nano Hagania, Ka Mashantucket Pequot, Kataptanamo, what you want me to talk about? Kumanasha, Oyo Nishne. So greetings, everyone who's tuned in, and thank you for sitting through my cousin Debbie. Thank you for all that she shared. Thank you for all that she does to represent our region and our history, our culture, our arts, all that she does in general. So like Debbie ended with, I would like to begin with just thanking Nolumbeka, Okitau, everyone who's out in the western part of the state of Massachusetts, trying to bring about awareness and increased awareness, making our culture accessible to those who reside in those regions. I myself seem to tend not necessarily to focus on more of the eastern side of the state, but it seems more of the schools there and communities there reach out to me. So I'm hoping that after today's discussion, anyone who may not have known about some of the resources that Debbie and I are more than happy to share with your communities out west. Some of them have already been shared in some of the communities in the eastern part of the state, and clearly more of it needs to happen. So, so again, I just want to say thanks, Jennifer, Kate. I want to thank Liz behind the scenes and everybody who's making today possible. So, and again, thank you guys for tuning in. I also was peeking at some of those questions that were in the Q&A, and it looked like maybe there wasn't possibly time to follow up on some of those. So I did want to also reiterate what Debbie ended on with the term like Mohawk, for example, meaning flesh eaters and whatnot. A lot of these terms have been applied to our people, not by our people. So the term Iroquois is what most people refer to the Haudenosaunee people as. The Haudenosaunee are the Longhouse people. So that's what they refer to themselves as. And of the Six Nations, the Mohawk is one of them. So I myself, not being Mohawk, may not be the appropriate person to speak on how they prefer to be called, but as Debbie pointed out, flesh eater is not a very flattering description of any individual. I'd also like to point out that the Dene of the Southwestern region do not call themselves Navajo. The Navajo was a term that was applied to them as well, and apparently it means thief in Spanish. So again, a lot of these terms are very common. Navajo Nation is the largest nation in the continent, and yet a lot of this information isn't out there readily available to the public. So again, that's just another example of the great power of this teaching tool, Zoom, and all that Nolumbeka has brought about to bring these resources and information available to the greater public. So again, I just want to say thank you. And to also end on the questions that were coming in prior to me starting, Native Land Conservancy, I believe, is the website nativelandconservancy.org is the website. It is Ramona Peters, a respected, reputable elder from our Mashpee Wampanoag community. However, she has been taking land into trust for quite some time now. Originally, it was a very difficult challenge when we're pretty fortunate every once in a while as Indigenous people to have our ancestral remains returned to us, the actual artifacts, unfortunately, bones and human remains that for whatever reason were not only uncovered, but held as possessions by other people. So when we have those repatriation items returned, it's very difficult at times to find a piece of land where they will no longer be disturbed. They shouldn't have been disturbed in the first place. So part of what Ramona does is not only securing land to preserve the land itself for our future environment, but also to have locations such as those to repatriate items if needed to be. We've been very fortunate when the Quaker have Quaker meeting houses, which have been held in their protection for many years, many moons, many generations. And I don't know if there's any Quakers who are out in this audience listening tonight, but I know that there's many communities throughout the country, not just here in Massachusetts in this region, that are looking for ways to protect their ancestral remains on sacred lands that will no longer be disrupted. So just wanted to put it out there that the nativelandconservancy.org is, they've been doing it. I recently was approached probably about 2 years ago now by Kingston, a group, the Muddy Pond Trust and Wilderness Project. Very affluent family, had made extensive riches from this region over the years. As the patriarch of that family is getting elder, he wanted to leave something in his legacy that could preserve the land, preserve the environment, the region that he has called home and raised his children in. And he also wanted to make sure that it conveyed that relationship that the Native American culture already has with this environment. So basically they came about donating a huge tract of land that they had acquired, focusing it, designating it strictly for an educational institution that they themselves will be coming up with a funded, possibly in an endowment that will continue to fund programming that will take place on this particular piece of land in Kingston for many moons to come. So they've basically already turned the land itself over to the Native Land Conservancy. So being asked as a liaison to help with this this joint venture, I was very honored to be approached by the family. The Sheehan family is who it was. They had been looking for years to find a way to do exactly what was just asked in this chat room. They didn't know who to trust or how to trust even the process. And I was very happy when our tribal community actually it was brought to their attention first. And I asked, how others feel about the Native Land Conservancy. And we all unanimously felt it's not held by any particular tribe, even though it's an elder from my own tribe. She's literally just trying to preserve lands. So it's not the Wampanoag ownership. It's not owned by anybody. It's particularly the Kingston parcel will be public accessible. They made sure that that was written into their paperwork, that all of the programming that takes place, all the buildings that they're funding to have buildings removed. It is a very environmentally sensitive area, but they're also paying to have buildings put up that will be able to house some of the programming that they want to make available to the public. So if any of this sounds intriguing, obviously we're always happy to receive lands back into our protection. However, thinking ahead along these lines of how we can create unique opportunities for others to experience those lands as well is something that I hope can be part of that process and discussion. And again, hopefully we'll have time maybe after my discussion today to talk a little bit more about that. So I just wanted to start off on those things. So if I may selfishly jump into some of the topics of discussion that I had in store for today. I travel extensively. Jennifer did a pretty good job explaining, how we've traveled and crossed paths many times out on the Powwow Trail. I hear of her work even when I'm not there to witness it myself, and other tribal communities well beyond the New England region. So I'm sure that she herself has seen a lot of what I can attest to. I'm not sure how many viewers out here travel extensively well beyond the region. But it's just become increasingly aware to me over time throughout my travels of how other regions represent the indigenous cultures there. Um, as Debbie mentioned, just how you relate to them, I guess, verbal meanings of words and things like that obviously have some pretty strong underlying meanings that many people may not be aware of. However, when I've traveled to other regions and I see that the arts are being promoted, when I see the awareness of the indigenous people ever existed there are being promoted, let alone that continued existence, it's always great feeling. I can't even say a great observation to just simply see. It's something that I feel when I'm in areas where you can literally feel the culture is still alive. Having spent my entire life living in New England, it wasn't until I traveled that I realized, wow, like we have pretty much very little to no representation throughout our entire region. So really catapulted me into what I guess I've been considered doing all these years, which is just finding more ways to represent my people. So unfortunately, I did not have time. I'm leaving on a cross-country road trip myself again tomorrow with my son, and I've been scrambling to get ready for that. So I was hoping to put together a PowerPoint to share some of the images that I've gathered from as far as well over 10 years ago. I was very fortunate to be asked to be part of ECHO, the Education Through Cultural and Historic Organizations project. It united tribes that had done whaling. It actually invited other tribes like the Mississippi Band Choctaw, who obviously had never done whaling, but they were welcoming us into their community to share our culture and history. Throughout my travels to these other communities is when I really it was very obvious the whole theme of the collaboration was culture. So that was already a focus. But one of the first places that I stopped, I'm going to have to unfortunately share some images through my phone here that I've been gathering over the years. So one of the first images that I'd like to share, hopefully folks will be able to see it okay. So what I'm showing here is what can be seen on the floor of the Seattle airport. So I'm going to scroll and show you just how small and discreet, I guess is the word, these images are. So this is another image of how it transitions. You'll notice there are other images up here. So these are very, very small. These are very, very small. I like most people, I'm usually busy when I'm in an airport. You're just trying to get to your flight. You don't have time to dilly-dally, and to know that something so small that could have easily been overlooked is actually something that pretty much jumped out at me and stood out throughout my whole experience. I'm excited. I'm going to Alaska. We had traveled to Hawaii and other places, but this literally was one of the highlights of my trip and my experience. So again, I'm not sure what folks can see, but these are very, very small tiles that have been bronze, if you will, that has been placed within tiles, kind of an inlay, if you will, and literally just mere inches, just a couple inches. However, it made a huge, bold statement to somebody like myself. I felt proud that the Native Indigenous people were represented, their artwork was represented. The little planes actually incorporated some of the ravens and the whales and the things that are very characteristic of that Northwestern Pacific Coast Northwestern region. So prominent arts and culture thriving out there. Their canoe journeys and things like that, I'm sure, are well attended by both Native and non-Native alike. So I just wanted to share that is how the Seattle region is showcasing their culture. So I think I'll end with, this is a display. This display was in the airport. So while I was walking, I also came across what I consider to be a very good display of various artwork from their culture. Myself personally, I would like to give credit to TF Green Airport. I have seen TF Green Airport in Providence do similar small scale exhibits on Indigenous culture from this region. So I do want to give credit where credit is due. However, I also want to point out how atrocious it has been when I traveled to Logan Airport. Logan Airport is a hub for the region. It is not just for the state of Massachusetts. So if you are coming to this region from Zimbabwe or any other part of the world, and you're coming here to see Narragansett or Pequot culture in Connecticut, if you cannot fly directly to Rhode Island, you usually tend to fly in and out of Boston. So it's literally the first place you're seeing and the last place you're going to see as you come and go from this area. I was very fortunate to have a friend of mine who I went to high school with. She's been working a food kiosk in one of the many terminals that makes up Logan Airport. I had been trying to get the Mashantucket Pequot maple syrup that's being produced on the reservation in Connecticut accessible to the public. And I thought, what a great way to do so while putting ourselves in a venue such as Logan Airport. When I went there to deliver this syrup by hand, I had asked if she could help me maybe just look around, scour basically, to look for any sign of cultural representation throughout the entire terminal that she had access to. So her terminal actually was an international terminal. Most of the flights that were coming in and out of the terminal where she worked were mainly Caribbean islands and other islands in other parts of the world, not continental US flights. So I'm walking around not only with my eyeballs, but with her eyeballs as well. Two sets of eyeballs. Neither one of us scouring up and down could find any existence whatsoever that we had ever existed in New England. However, we came across a very large, probably close to a quarter-mile plaque, which was basically a series of plaques. They had just recently been installed. I actually believe it was in its final installation phases. It may not have been complete and open to the public. It was that new, and it was highlighting 400 years of innovation. When it highlighted the 400 years of innovation through these plaques, as I mentioned, just literally a wall full of plaques, it also wouldn't announce what was created here in Mass or what was achieved, but who did so. Maybe even what college they did it on behalf of or whatnot. Books that were written by this particular author, and all of these attributes and things, credit being given to people. The one plaque that I saw that said a harpoon blade was created in Massachusetts that revolutionized the whaling industry had no name. And I thought, wow, what a disrespectful way to write us out of history. The man's name was Amos Smalley. Many of you can look him up. He has an entire exhibit, I believe, at the New Bedford Whaling Museum, because it's common knowledge that he was an Aquinnah Wampanoag who indeed created that harpoon blade himself. Why they chose not to credit him or the tribe or nation, it's catastrophic. It's painful. It's derogatory. It's as I said, when I can give Providence T.F. Green credit where credit is due, apparently we have no credit due, according to Logan Airport. Adjacent to these plaques highlighting 400 years of innovation, none of which was ever innovated by any native whatsoever. I happen to notice headlines was another manner in which the Logan Airport decided to highlight its history, the history of the region. Headlines, great. There's got to be a headline in here about Indigenous people. We've gathered at the day of mourning since time immemorial, since my entire lifetime. I want to say that day of mourning that takes place still at Plymouth Waterfront was started by my dad and Frank James before my time was even done here on this planet. And it still continues, yet didn't see any headlines about that. Needless to say, our powwow has been going on for 100 years this year. Didn't see any headlines about that. I've seen headlines about these things. I saw the headline when our people finally found the slave descendants that had been taken from us and brought to Bermuda. The article was written in 2002. There was actually many front page articles, both on the Cape and in the Boston Herald and Globe. There was no mention of that. It really startled me. It was 400, it was however many years newspapers have been printed in Boston. I cannot think of any man who has won the Boston Marathon more than Tarzan Brown of the Narragansett Nation. This man did not just win Boston Marathon year after year, back to back. He would actually run a marathon in the state of New York and hitchhike or run his way to the Boston Marathon to win it the next day. He won it so many times that he would actually take his time on what is now named Heartbreak Hill. He would specifically wait on that hill for his closest competitor to get as close as he could to them, just so that he could humiliate them on that hill and destroy their spirit as he went on to win the race. This man is a notable athlete. He did not just win the marathon, as I mentioned. I think it was 1935. He actually went over to the Olympics to represent this entire country. And to know that this region cannot even uphold that man's legacy, and it's something that's proud. It's not it's not a stain on the underwear of America's progress. It is actually something that everyone in this region should be proud of. And it's something that unfortunately many people in this region may live their whole lives and never even know to be proud of. So these are the kinds of things that I was hoping to talk about today. I have no idea, once again, who is in this audience, who's listening, what resources they have available, what friends and network of people that they can communicate and convey some of this to. So I just only have a couple more images that I would like to share, if you will, of other regions and how they, again, depict. So this is the Southwest. I travel to the Southwest a lot. And unfortunately, you cannot read that. But it basically talks about Sky Harbor Airport in Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport recently installed the actual artwork you're seeing in this particular image. I myself went there just this past year. I think at the beginning of this year, it was around, it was just before the COVID struck. So it was probably around January, February that I think was my last time visiting that region. And that was when I noted some of these images that I took. The images that I'm going to share with you were mainly found in the airport itself, as well as a lot of the, a lot of the communities that are also around the Arizona area. So having some problems for whatever reason. Phone was upside down, sorry. So I think some folks are familiar with Kokopelli. There were images of that. This fish that I just showed you, other artwork that incorporated, in my opinion, incorporated the traditional arts of the region. So this is this is that same image in its natural environment. So what you're looking at is a tunnel. This is a pedestrian tunnel. And the pedestrian tunnel goes under the road. I'm not sure if you can see the markings inside of the tunnel, along with the fish on the exterior. So I actually do have a better picture to show you those markings that are inside the tunnel. So this is prefab concrete. This is something that anybody can do anywhere, any city. It's something that, in my opinion, will speak volumes to representing this region. Something that's pretty easily done. Municipalities have the funding, I'm sure, to do it. They have the means to do it. We have a lot of traffic circles out here. So I was also very pleased to find that this was one in traffic circle out by the Grand Canyon. If you are traveling to the Grand Canyon, you yourself may have visited this very same traffic circle in Cameron, Arizona. When you notice, if you couldn't tell, that's a turtle. That's a turtle depicting some of the more stylized artwork of their region. We have turtle connections here. Ours would look a little different if you were to do turtles depicted on the Pacific Northwest coast. I'm sure they would look slightly different, but would probably speak to the traditional arts of that region. So in sharing these video imagery with you, this will be the very last one. This is just, again, something I saw on the side of the highway. This was right in the city of Phoenix before I got out of the city. Just little native designs that are actually landscaped. These were landscaped into the side of the roadway through, I think, alternating rock colors. They were just different colored rocks laid out in that manner to illustrate what you just saw. Very cost effective, fairly cheap and affordable, pretty easy to do. So I just want to wrap up. Not that I'm wrapping up. I'm going to have plenty of time for Q&A, I'm hoping. But I'm very proud to mention some of the stuff I've been fortunate to be invited to. I mentioned the Muddy Pond Trust organization, which has already pretty much worked out what they need to with the surrounding communities to actually turn that land back over to the Indigenous people. We will be conducting programming on that as soon as we're permitted to do so. So those are, again, projects I'm very honored to be part of. However, the city of Salem, I really want to just promote all that they've been doing. Mayor Driscoll, particularly female mayor who came into office, I believe, a couple years ago now. I have not been on Facebook for at least a couple years, but apparently she made a very public statement about her first days in office in the city of Salem. She said she walked in, she looked around the room, and she said, "All I see are old dead white guys. And I don't even feel represented as a female, let alone as a female leader. And I clearly do not see any representation of the indigenous leadership prior to the city even calling itself Salem." So that awareness of hers came right from the very start of her administration, her term. And it's something that she didn't just put those words out into the public. She's actually living up to those words. Her faculty and staff reached out to me asking how they can improve awareness. This was years ago. This was before a lot of the riots and things that have been going on now to kind of, if you will, change the climate of our country. We've been begging pretty much for people to get rid of names like the Washington Redskins for literally generations. And unfortunately, it's until right now, because of this climate, as I mentioned, in the country, recent events, police brutality, and all that, it's unfortunately brought us to finally have these discussions. I'm very, very proud to say Salem was opening those discussions before all of this. They are continuing these discussions, and I'm really anxious to see what will result from not only my work, but the community of Massachusetts Ponkapog, who are also working with the region. That is their respective region. I am a Wampanoag. I am from the southeastern part of the state, just as Charlemont and areas where some of the viewers are right now would be attributed to Mohican, Pecumtuck, and other communities that I myself am not part of. So again, it's an honor to be here to speak on behalf of the Indigenous. I myself would love to take some time to have some dialogue about what we as people can do to better promote awareness to Indigenous culture, to promote awareness to all the contributions that Indigenous people have created. Tarzan Brown, I mentioned as a local regional hero. However, there are many Jim Thorpe examples that have been set and unfortunately haven't been explained, exposed, and shared. So I think that there's a lot that the Indigenous culture, again, just does not get credit for to begin with, but also just the lack of awareness that we ever existed here. For many of you who may have followed some of the other Zoom meetings and things that I've been participating in, a lot of this being online now, I know it's being shared, recorded, and shared after. Good chance today's program will be shared after it's aired. I constantly speak about how I had to fight to defend my own identity. I had to fight just to literally prove to non-native people who I am throughout my entire life. It's something that most tribes have to do. We have to prove to descendants of immigrants, people who are from other countries, we have to prove to them that it was our ancestors who are here. How they even determine that is beyond me. However, it's degrading and something every tribe as a community has to go through. But as an individual growing up in New England, I had to explain why I don't hunt buffalo. I had to answer the questions, do I live in a teepee? No, none of my ancestors ever lived in a teepee. I don't even understand what those homes would be doing in this environment. So those are the kinds of things that, again, I'm sure anyone out in the region of Western Mass, Charlemont, I do want to mention of the schools that I visit, most I mentioned were in the eastern part of the state. The Academy at Charlemont, I believe, is the name of the school. The Academy at Charlemont had actually invited me, I think it was over a year ago as well, to come visit their school. And by all means, the topic they asked me to share was cultural appropriation. It was then upon my journey, I'd been up there before, I hadn't been there in a long time, but upon my journey, I'm seeing why. I'm seeing the many trading posts along the Mohawk Trail, as it's stated, that are clearly not doing us much of a representation of this region, let alone authentic Native culture in general sometimes. So that was the main reason they had asked me to come. That was clearly became the topic throughout my entire time at the Academy at Charlemont. And it's something that I've actually been continuing to try and follow up with their region with. I actually stopped and spoke with some of the people who actually operate those trading posts, some of which I see many ways in which I might be able to help them. And unfortunately, some of those trading posts, I think, were beyond help. If there are people in this audience who are familiar with those regional tourist attractions that are already in place, or if you have a business, I've spoken to a woman who she's out of the Boston region. I believe it was Sharon, where I was presenting that night. And she said she has a beauty salon, like a nail parlor or whatever it is. She says that, again, this was way before the riots and the pandemic or any of this recent events. She said that she's had a land acknowledgement in her shop just so that anyone who comes to her shop to get their nails done or whatever will know this business operates on the land that was once indigenous, the tribe, the Massachusetts Wampanoag. She mentioned a few tribes, I believe. But this is something, again, that she's been doing. Land acknowledgements are becoming more common, and we greatly appreciate anyone in this audience who would like to draft something similar. I'm sure Debbie or myself would be happy to help with drafting those kinds of land acknowledgements to be either spoken or written and displayed permanently. That's a great step that anybody in this audience, I'm sure, can find an opportunity to do. But there's obviously many other ways that we can increase visibility and awareness throughout the regions. So I'm just going to take a brief pause. I know I've given us all a lot to consider, but I see that there's a lot going on in the chat room and on the Q&A. So I just want to touch base real quick and also give folks an opportunity to guide the remaining time we have to guide the discussion in the area that we can all agree upon. Jump in the Q&A here myself. So,
Okay, Annawon, can you hear me?
absolutely.
Okay, so it seems like there really is some movement about making our corner of the world better. And I was wondering, on that Mohawk Trail trading post with the big statue of the Indian and the tin teepee, would you see them removed, or would you see kiosks that explain realistic history and some fine art? What could you see happening there, in instead of what's there, or in addition to what's there?
So I think, if I recall, again, this was well over a year ago that I traveled up there. I'm pretty sure there was more than one tin teepee at more than one of the trading posts that I saw. And I also want to point out, I don't think I got to see all of the trading posts. There was one that many people spoke about that I myself, I think I vaguely remember visiting when I was a very young child, which is no longer, I think, in business. I didn't make it out to that one. I guess they used to host powwows and other events. So there are other, I'm sure, examples that I might not have seen, but I know I probably saw at least two that fit the description. So I just want to focus on the one that I did see that, again, I felt there was an opportunity to help those folks. The other trading post was literally being operated by someone who was clearly from out of the country, still had a huge language barrier themselves to communicate. Whereas most of the artwork, if you would call it that I saw in that particular shop was foreign. It was not even from this country, made in China, made in Japan, artwork, trinkets and whatnot. So no, there's literally no manner of signage or educational content I think can help that particular person and that particular business. I think that one simply has to go out of business at this time. The one that I would like to mention that I think similar fits the description. They had a tin teepee, perhaps a metal buffalo of some sort out front. They had a few different pretty good size, images depicting culture, but they did have a mural on the wall of this one particular building I'm talking about, which actually showed, I think, a Wetu and a longhouse. It actually showed imagery from this region. So in my idea, I actually am now in the process of hopefully creating, my father had a trading post in Rhode Island. I'm sure you remember that, Jennifer. It's still there. The totem poles are still up. The sign is still up, but I myself would love to create those opportunities. And I would love to highlight cultures well beyond this region and educate people to the diversity of Indigenous cultures. So yes, I do believe there could be signage in some of these examples. There kind of needs to be, because you can't just place an iconic figure like a buffalo or a teepee and in an area like this and not explain how impractical or culturally inappropriate it could be, obviously without that kind of informational background to go with it. So yes, by all means, there can be things, even with what is currently going on, just small enhancements to make the educational opportunities we need to bring about. And I'm also going to, if Jennifer's still hearing me, I think we had discussed how she may be able to filter through some of these questions. And I don't know if there's repetitive themes to some of these questions that we can answer multiple questions at one time, but kind of leaning on my behind the scenes crew to guide where the rest of our conversation will go. So again,
so there is a question. Sorry, there is a question about if you would come to a school as a presenter. There is that question. So how do people get in touch with you to come to their school?
So I'm very glad Debbie introduced herself with her website, or I should say signed off sharing her website. Hopefully, I think she emailed it, or I saw her typing it up. So hopefully those can be shared with other folks, because I myself, I didn't really mention how not only am I thankful that Nolumbeka has us here today and has gathered us all, but they've also found a female and a male voice. I find it very awkward when I'm asked to represent an entire culture or race, and I'm just one individual and I'm only a man. Our females had far too much roles in our communities here in New England that we cannot include their voices. So thanks again for having Debbie, and anyone who's interested in having me in their school, I would highly recommend having Debbie. Kitty Hendricks Miller is another educator that goes around and travels to schools. So anytime I'm in school settings, I always recommend it's good to have a balanced representation of male and female voices. So if you wish to contact me directly, you can Google my name. A lot of my information will come up. However, firstlightfoundation.net is a website that I have created. I do not operate the site. Somebody else is operating it. It's been very difficult to try and get things updated and loaded as needed to be. But within that site, in the main menu, basically, you can find First Light Fun from the main menu. That's what I call my educational programming when I go to schools or public events. And when you click on First Light Fund, that menu of that page should allow you to, I think, book your event would be the selection. And you can literally do that right online. You don't have to directly contact me. If you'd like to, I'm more than happy to do that as well. So there's a few ways you can find out. Also, I want to point out mcnaa.org. I don't know if Debbie already did that. I want to say Debbie is listed there amongst many other artists, speakers, people who can talk about politics. There's a lot of things that, a lot of subject matter that even myself, I might not be the best person. So Massachusetts Center for Native American Awareness, which is mcnaa.org. Whenever I always have to ask, how did you even find me? Why did you invite me to your school? I don't advertise, and most of the people tell me that that's where they found out about me and other artists. So thank you for asking.
Okay, so Annawon, we've got a great question here. Can you please share which tribe or tribes lived in the area of Belmont or Boston, and what forms of buildings were made in this area? How would you want to see people move forward in terms of a permaculture way of living in balance with nature?
First and foremost, don't trust square houses. Yes. I don't know how to say it loud enough. I can't repeat it enough. Never trust square houses. So if you want to ask how we can do better or how we can live in peace with our environment, we are at war with our environment just because we are living in square structures. Until I see rabbits digging square holes, if I see a fox dig a square hole, a bird build a square bird's nest, maybe then I can trust some of these architecture. But you're literally working against the environment to heat these homes, to cool these buildings, to prevent them from blowing down in hurricanes and tornadoes. I mean, it's tragedy after tragedy has shown us that that's not the way to do things. But for whatever reason, all these Americans insist on doing things by a European mentality. So first and foremost, I would like to see any of the architects in this audience that can help us bring about any of the Indigenous homes. As far as Belmont, they were probably coastal enough that the Nipmuc refer to themselves as the freshwater people because they're pretty much landlocked. They were not able to get to the coastlines that some of our other communities had. So if you had a seasonal migration as an opportunity, you may have had more than one house and more than one location during the year. So I know for myself, my Narragansett family, actually my Pequot and my Wampanoag family, all of my heritage comes from coastal communities which migrated to the coastline for planting, inland for the harvest, after the harvest. Long houses, typically inland for multiple families to dwell under, individual family settings at individual family planting locations. So it's safe to say areas like Belmont would have had similar throughout this region. They were really just round homes. So again, no square houses whatsoever, round homes that I had a friend last night that was asking, oh, I'm building a house, what can you suggest? I said, well, if your door doesn't face east, your house is going to be working against you. And if you want to have good energy in your home, again, it's very hard to trust square homes with corners in them. Energy can get trapped in those corners. It's one of the reasons why our houses were round. Negative energy, unfortunately, makes its way into our home, sometimes right through the TV screen. So you have to have a way for that to navigate its way around and out of the house. Our doors would typically face east, again, working with nature rather than working against it. So I could easily probably just spend an entire hour talking about the many reasons why things were done the way they have been done for thousands of years here. And unfortunately, we just don't have that time. I mean, I just want to kind of just reiterate, this is America, but it's living in a very European fashion. For whatever reason, it just never did away with its connection to those things from Europe.
Hi there. I'm going to read another one, but I will share that I saw a picture book that in Scotland, they also had the conical shape because it made sense for the environment. So
Absolutely.
very interesting. So now we have a question from the Springfield or Chicopee, Mass area. And the question is, and I don't, okay, has the Chicopee, Mass or Springfield, Mass taken any steps to represent how their lands belong to specific tribes when settled by Europeans? I believe I'm reading it correctly. Have there been steps to honorably give tribute to the Indigenous people here? And this person is a descendant of William Pynchon, responsible for purchasing the land. And I also don't want to, if this human being also please get on the mailing list of the Nolumbeka project, because we need to be able to connect with each other after this. But if either of our presenters have anything to say specifically to the question, please do.
I would just, again, like to point out that I myself am not from that area. In regards to returning land, I mentioned the Native Land Conservancy, which does take lands into trust that are beyond our typical ancestral lands or what we may have had ancestral connections to. So, and I also think we mentioned that, unfortunately, a lot of that area, those tribes were disbanded. Jennifer and I are both familiar with the Brotherton people of Wisconsin who, during the times of King Philip's War and a lot of the conflicts taking place here in the 1600s and whatnot, they fled and they were given refuge elsewhere, and that's what they now call home. These were Mohican people. These were Stockbridge Munsee people. So those were the tribes that I know are from that area. So in saying that, I also want to point out that folks like Nolumbeka, as she just mentioned, please get in touch with them directly. Okitau, as we've discussed, is another organization that is currently doing things in that area. So I would personally just turn it over to those who are operating Indigenous forms of representation currently in those regions. And again, obviously, I'm an ally. I'm part of that team. However, I hope that in any way, Jennifer and Kate will reach out to me if I can help them. But this is something that I really encourage those in that particular region to reach out to organizations such as Okitau and Nolumbeka themselves. And of course, they can clearly and will refer you to people like myself, Debbie, and whoever needs be, so that we can have valid, equal representation. I'm very proud to point out that when I worked at Boston Children's Museum, I took that job in the early millennium, around the turn of the millennium. And it was something that I then immediately realized, wow, I didn't realize my dad had such a connection with the Boston Children's Museum. And what they've always done is include Native people in anything that they put out about Native people. So having a board, if you will, including Indigenous people to have say in what's taking place out there. We don't necessarily have to show up. We got these beautiful Zoom formats and things right now where people like myself, Deb, people like my dad, like I said, we've constantly been extending ourselves to help anybody who's on these missions. So I just want to thank all of you who are taking these things as serious as you are and keeping moving forward. And we're here to help in any way we can.
Awesome. Annawon, thank you so much for sharing your perspective. I can only imagine us having a museum, but that is run by Native people. I can only imagine, instead of the Mohawk Trail having caricatures, to have real representation of the fine art that's available by Wabanaki people. I can only imagine Okitau and MCNAA being totally funded so that there can be Native youth programs. And Kate has a few things to say because we're going to just blow off the screen any minute. Thanks so much.
Yes, thank you everyone for being here. And there are many things that all of us can do. That's another myth that people have been taught, which is things happened in the past and there's nothing you can do. Well, actually, we're all living in the present, creating the future. So there's lots that we can each do according to our own personality and gifts and everything. So in the Massachusetts area, there is the Indigenous Legislative Agenda, and this is very important. You can Google it. There are 5 items, but especially 3 that are being worked on this session. And please get in touch with people across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and help move these forward. And particularly, I'd like to say, my sister who lives in Vermont, and she was saying how they're going to make the state parks are going to be bilingual, English and Abenaki. And I said, well, in Massachusetts, we're still trying to change our flag that is gruesomely anti-Native American. So this is very important that we can all do. And people were also asking questions about language. And there are many language programs among all the different Indigenous tribes in the Northeast. So they're definitely looking for funds to help support those schools and bring up a new generation of children who are bilingual. And some of these schools are open to people from the greater community also. And again, school programs, as Deb and Annawon and many resources have been shared. So please, yes, encourage your schools to get these programs in.
Thanks everybody for attending. And as a famous Native man said, let's put our heads together and see what kind of a world we can make for our children. Who was that, Annawon? Do you remember?
Not Jake Swamp. It was one of the Haudenosaunee leaders, though. Oren Lyons, maybe?
Oh, okay.
Possibly.
Well, someone
Oren.
will Google it.
Okay, hey everyone. Sabotage.
Thank
Have
you,
a great
guys.
day.